Hi everybody, welcome to the English department's new YouTube channel, podcast, and video project. We are honored to have one of our faculty here, Michelle Liu. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Would you be willing to just kind of introduce yourself, a brief glimpse into maybe the courses you're teaching currently or about to teach, and the research or work that you're currently doing?
Okay, I am a senior lecturer in the English department and associate director of writing programs here. I'm currently teaching Asian American literature. Some of the things that I work on are matters of race and narrative and emotion, and how all three of these components work to our integrated system to shape how we see and deeply feel about the world, as well as how we engage with ourselves. The work I do outside the university includes Humanities Washington, where I have a talk that discusses how two seminal pieces of American literature, To Kill a Mockingbird and Uncle Tom's Cabin, have really shaped how we as a country feel about race. Humanities Washington is interesting. It's a branch of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And what they do is they give funding to various states to sponsor talks by people in the community or somebody who fancies themselves an expert either through study or through experience, to give talks somehow related to the humanities: philosophy, art, history, literature, and say why the humanities matters.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been an especially challenging and interesting project to do because I work at a very STEM-oriented university and I live in a very STEM-oriented society.
Yeah.
But when I go out into these places outside the university and in my classes, people have such a hunger to look and think about the questions that only humanities really can address, and how questions that help us think about what kind of future we're moving towards and how we get there.
How are you going about with the students working through articulating the value of the humanities?
The way that people perceive STEM is that it's very objective. And it comes from the root of an object, something that's there. It's always there, whether you're there or not. It makes no difference. It's objective. And so something that I talk about to help people conceptualize what's different that we do in the English department and maybe in humanities at large is to think of the subjective, mm-hmm. where in a sentence, an object always comes after the verb. It's what's acted upon. But subjectivity is about thinking about what acts on top of that object. Mm-hmm. The subject uses the verb to do something with the object. So much of what I think about what I do in my classrooms, and so many of my colleagues do too, is recovering what it means to think of yourself as an actor, the subject of the sentence rather than an object of the sentence.
Yeah.
And when people start thinking of themselves like that, to have a whole field of studies which thinks that what we are making a difference on how we act upon the world. And when we're only looking at or trying to distill what we see for the objective, we're losing a large part of the sentences that we use to construct our realities. We're only looking at the object. We're not looking at the verbs. We're not looking at the subject of our realities. And so my students, like in English 302, the ones that a lot of English majors take, they really like that metaphor for thinking about, yes, we know objective knowledge, but what's the worth of thinking about subjective knowledge? And when we think of the subject more than the object, we can think about how reality is something that's always changing and malleable, depending on the questions we ask of it.
A word just came up for me. It's also agency, thinking about like our role and our responsibilities to our society or to our culture and to our communities when we are moving and acting in this world.
Yes, and your words sparked something in me when you said the word responsibility, because responsibility has a connotation to it as being heavy, something that must be taken up. But something that I really love from Toni Morrison and her work Playing in the Dark is she breaks down the word responsibility, where responsibility, of course, has the connotations of duty. But it also, if you think about it, it's a compound of response and ability. Your ability to respond, your ability to feel, your ability to use the initial reactions about what you see around you and that emotional energy you carry with you as an impulse to make you more able, to make you more responsible. And that's something that I think literature and any art does so well, increases our ability to respond. And it's been so interesting for me to think about how I'm teaching Asian American literature and what I'm doing with Humanities Washington Talk specifically, is to think they're both geared towards thinking about these particular racialized positions, Asian Americans and African Americans. They have been differently experienced pain in the United States, borne the brunt of inequality. Slavery from the very beginning was rooted into the United States founding, and Asian Americans, or Asians as conceptualized in the United States, has been the only grouping that has been targeted as being unfit to immigrate to the United States. We're the only racial group where there's been laws saying groups from this country, no, they're just incompatible with the United States. And so even though those laws have changed, the rise of xenophobia now has really hooked into that understanding of Asians as a racial position is still always present within the surface. When things get bad, it's clear that the belonging that Asian Americans have is always conditional. And so these, I don't mean to compare the pains that, people who get coded as Black in the United States and people who get coded as Asian in the United States. They're not comparable. But they both, artists who work within these parameters are working with the same challenge of how to be really present with this pain and create art that helps other people feel response-able about what to do with it. And so what's so interesting in my Asian American literature course right now, of course we're talking about the fear that so many of the students feel, uneasy about their status in the United States or uneasy when they're going out to the grocery store. And yes, we acknowledge that, but we also talk about how so many of these artists, the earliest artist we're reading this year is Carlos Bulosan, working in the 1930s during the Great Depression. Times were hard then. About 25% unemployment. Carlos Bulosan himself was an itinerant worker for his early years in the United States. But to be able to create such poignant and imaginative and generous pieces of art that tries to connect what this pain means to other people. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that we read, so I want people to come to Asian American literature and not just say, oh, look, we've suffered too, but instead to look when these artists are working under a particular strain of being an invisibilized and marginalized minority, how this has led them to create art that reaches out and bridges out in ways that are unexpected and beautiful and joyous at the same time they talk about this pain. But the first thing that comes to mind is that this particular moment in time teaching, when there is so much xenophobia going around, as a way to allay some of the anxiety that a lot of Americans are feeling by blaming someone else. That's how xenophobia works. It's really troubled a base assumption that so many young students come into the classroom with, which is, oh, these things may have happened before, but we're getting progressively better now.
Mm-hmm.
They have this notion that things are getting better. And in many ways, depending on the vector you're looking, things are getting better, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be attendant to how the past is always with us. And the past it's not a dead object. The past has its continual afterlives in shaping how we think of the present now. And when we are in moments of prosperity and more boats are rising as the tide goes up, it may be harder to see that.
Yeah.
But I think now with COVID exposing so many fault lines we have in this country based off inequality and based off race. Okay. A lot of Black and brown folk are disproportionately being hit by COVID, and immigrant communities. It causes pause to think about the narratives we've told ourselves about how the United States works and this narrative of progress.
What have you found that you employ or do that helps support fostering a space that is safe but not comfortable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's something deeper than just agree to disagree, right? Because I think that's the only easy language we have to describe what that space looks like. And here's where literature is so helpful for fostering these discussions. And I know there's so many people in different parts of the university, like in the Evans School, who are interested in thinking about what it means to make space for discomfort. Where literature can become, or any art can be so valuable, is you get artists who are working to try to create that space and imagine and welcome us in. And it creates such a wonderful segue or handout to say, come into this space. How does this feel for you? Mm-hmm. And in so many of the pieces of literature we're talking about, they have wildly different imagined ways of welcoming a reader or inviting the reader into spaces of intense discomfort.
Yeah.
And to have discussions about this imagined space that an artist has created for us, it provides some way to realize that we're not going to be judged for reactions. In fact, literature is about creating a screen for us to judge why these reactions are happening in the first place. And so, at least for me, I can see that having difficult discussions in conjunction with literature are so helpful because they provide a place for people not to just talk about their own experience, but to talk where else their brains and thoughts and imagination can go. And so when you always have this idea of literature as something, imagining a future that can be different, imagining a community can be different, it's doing some pre-work for you about thinking about what you can change in the real world. I started working with this company, Books at Work, and the whole project is to connect or to send in facilitators to companies like a construction company or to Microsoft and have a discussion about a short story. And so I've done work with Microsoft, and they specifically want to use these short story discussions to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And we've had such wonderful discussions about how literature the piece of literature that we're reading can helps them deepen Microsoft's mission for how to be aware that technological change always causes ripple effects that are felt painfully and unequally across different parts of the population, but that's not where it stops. To think about what do you do what can you do as a company with the fact that when technology launches, it inevitably has unequal effects to it? Where can you move from there? How can you help ameliorate it? How can you anticipate how people may be wounded? Yeah. And I love that a huge company like Microsoft, they're using these short story discussions, and they have so many other forums within the company where they are talking about when a piece of technology comes out, the first thing they ask is who is excluded. And I love that. I mean, I love that technology company is thinking about these humanistic questions. The novel that I love, because this is a novel that people can, who are hesitant about reading a novel. Yeah. They, like, I had a student who said, oh, I was worried about having 2 weeks to read a novel, but I finished it in 3 days. You know, that kind of, this is super, is the book by Celeste Ng. The last name is Ng. The first name Celeste. And her first book, Everything I Never Told You. And her second novel just got made into a, I think, Hulu series, Little Fires Everywhere. But it's her first novel that I am deeply in love with looking about examining how this family, this mixed race family, is dealing with a death of one of their children. And in investigating how this death happened, widening out into the histories of each of these characters and how their personal histories have shaped and limited how they can love each other and how they can reach out to other people in their community. It's such a wonderful and deep meditation about how our pasts are always inscribed within us, how we're living our pasts even if we don't realize it. And it's only in being in these uncomfortable and risky conversations with other people can we start using what we've learned from the past differently and to make a future that we more want.
What do you find is inspiring you, giving you hope? And then also from your classes, what do you either find that students respond to saying gives them hope, or that you hope gives them hope?
Most people, if I'm just going to do a really broad brush, that most people feel like they're going to come into this class and learn about the history of Asian Americans, read some stuff about Asian American authors, and boom, done. But so many students come out of this class, at least it's my hope for them, but I can see this in their work too, with a fundamental rethinking of how stories about race have shaped how they connect with themselves and connect with their families and connect with other people, and how they themselves are also artists and authors who have a chance to rewrite the stories that shape how we connect, how we imagine writing, connecting with each other. So most people come in and thinking this is going to be, and a lot of these students coming in are from some kind of Asian background. And they think, and it fits really into this model that I think social media has fostered, that you can only be yourself if you're with like-minded people. Mm-hmm. But the way that this class works, and I've developed this in conjunction with the many conversations wonderful conversations I've had with students over the years, is reading this literature is a chance to branch out and connect with all what feels like across differences, but it's really trying to find how we are all trapped within these preset identities, and that when somebody shakes the cage of those presets, it starts shaking the cages for everyone else. Where I tell or invite students to hope for is that people don't expect that shaking to come from Asian Americans. But it's precisely because it's not unexpected that it can cause waves of change and awaken other people in ways that feel different when we're talking just within a white-black racial dyad. People can really shape and fundamentally create a different kind of future that comes from more people contributing in, rather than looking for one messianic person to change something. But it's really using collectivity in a different and creative way. What gives me hope is that I can use my literature classes to build a sense of cooperation as well.